There's a moment in last night's Indiana Fever game against the Portland Fire that's been blowing up on social media. And once you see it, you'll understand why the WNBA fanbase is calling for a coaching change today. Caitlin Clark is visibly pissed on the bench. Words are exchanged with Stephanie White. White throws the clipboard and then Clark gets sat down in favor of Raven Johnson while Portland goes on a 13-2 run. That's not a coincidence. That's a direct line between one coaching decision and a 100-84 blowout. This wasn't a talent problem. This was a scheme problem. And the players paid for it while Stephanie White pointed at her players in the post-game presser. Do you think it's finally time for the Indiana Fever to fire Stephanie White?
Had 3 assists in the first 3 minutes of the game, then both her and Aaliyah checked out, I think, around the 6:30 mark. Then Portland went on a 13-2 run. Just what was the reasoning for checking them out, or did either of them request a sub?
Well, AB's still on a minutes restriction, so she's coming out. And typically that's around the same time that we've been taking Caitlin out before. We didn't in Golden State just because, quite honestly, we did Raven in that environment without another ball handler on the floor. So that's been our typical substitution pattern.
Your thoughts in the comments below. Here we go. So, let's actually walk through the sequence because the clip alone doesn't tell you how bad the decision really was. Indiana came out sharp. Clark recorded 3 assists in the first 3 minutes. Boston was active in the paint and the Fever went up 8-2 before 2.5 minutes were even gone. That's not a fluke start. That's a team executing. So any reasonable coaching response to an 8-2 run is to leave your best players on the floor and let them keep going. White pulled Clark in Boston at the 6:30 mark of the first quarter. At that point, Indiana led 8-4. No foul trouble, no injuries, nothing wrong. The reason White gave after the game was that it's the regular substitution pattern.
Look at this. Crashed out on her, subbed her out. Look, then she throws the clipboard down. Throws the clipboard. Okay. Don't sign no epic deal, Caitlin Clark. Get the fuck out of Indiana. Leave this clown show of an organization. And Caitlin Clark got to the podium and let it be known that Stephanie White was her problem tonight, not the ref.
Portland immediately went on a 13-2 run. And by the time Clark and Boston checked back in at the 3:38 mark, Indiana was down 17-10. In under 3 minutes, a 6-point lead flipped into a 7-point deficit. And it happened entirely while Clark and Boston were sitting on the bench watching. That's the context for the footage everyone's been sharing. Clark is visibly heated.
Out of here. And Caitlin Clark addressed it and let it be known that her problem wasn't the fouls, it wasn't the refs, her problem was Stephanie White. Caitlin Clark come out and let it be known. Let's go, man. This is crazy. I can't believe Stephanie White got some nerve like she's some championship coach to be talking to Caitlin Clark.
It exchanged with White and then White throws the clipboard and sits Clark down in favor of Raven Johnson. While Portland is actively extending that lead, Clark isn't reacting to a missed shot or a bad call. She's watching Portland erase everything Indiana built while she was on the floor, and she can see exactly how it happened. What makes the clip so hard to watch isn't just the body language between Clark and White. It's that Clark is completely right to be
right over the top with the floater.
Vaughn sets the screen late with Clark switched on to her. Late attacking, lowers the head, able to roll it in the quarter. Late trying to find the roll. They doubled it. Gustafson the catch. Gustafson up with the left. Parker flips it back up top to Late. Late checked by Clark. Late free throw line jumper.
Portland didn't go on a 13-2 run because they suddenly got better. They went on a 13-2 run because Indiana's 2 best players sat down on a predetermined schedule while the game was still being won, and Caitlin Clark got to the podium and let it be known that Stephanie White was her problem tonight, not the refs. White's post-game answer was essentially that the substitution timing is standard procedure, which tells you she didn't see the 13-2 run as something she caused.
Season high for the rookie. Gustafson will let it fly from the corner. Oh, it is good. The forced foul on that last possession. See the foul trouble piling up for Indiana. Exler inside. Gustafson the flipper. And you can't.
Since I was about 10 years old playing against her in AAU.
Late draws 2, flips it up. Gustafson. Gustafson will set the screen. Late over to Gustafson. Gustafson inside. Park defending. Gustafson. Barker at the top. Gustafson down low. You already know what's going to
WNBA analysts who cover the league daily pulled up the timestamps almost immediately after the clip started circulating because the run differentialed the second Clark. And Boston sat down doesn't need any extra commentary. The numbers do it on their own. This isn't about one bad timeout or one questionable play call. White treated a fixed rotation as more important than an active lead. And Portland punished that rigidity immediately and kept punishing it. Clark's frustration on that bench isn't a player losing her composure under pressure. It's a player watching a winnable game get handed away in real time. And the worst part is that the damage from that single substitution didn't stop when Clark checked back in at 3:38. Portland had already built the foundation for what became a 37-point third quarter, and Caitlin Clark addressed it and let it be known that her problem wasn't the fouls. It wasn't the refs. Her problem was Stephanie White. 37 points in one quarter. That's what Portland dropped on Indiana in the third, and the Fever's defense didn't suddenly fall apart because Portland got hot. The problems were already there in the first half and White never fixed them. Carla Leite ran Portland's offense apart like she'd watched every Fever.
Yeah, rotations were a little bit slow, and everything in every coverage that we really tried. And when we switched, they did a great job exploiting it. They played with great energy. So you got to give Portland credit. I thought they were really good. They were aggressive. Obviously, they shot the ball well, almost 40% from three, 50% from the field. It's a recipe for success. And we just have to be a little bit more disruptive in everything that we're doing.
Film session before the game, finishing with 18 points and 12 assists. And the way she did it was pretty simple. She kept finding the spots Indiana's switching defense left open. When you switch every screen and your players aren't matched up well for it, the offense already knows where the gaps are before they even run the action. Portland ran it over and over and Indiana kept biting. Megan Gustafson finished with 22 points and shot a perfect 8 for 8 from the field. That doesn't happen because she had a great shooting night. That happens because Indiana's defensive assignments kept dropping her into open looks and Portland's guards were hunting those dump-offs to the bigs all game long. Gustafson didn't have to create anything. She just caught the ball in good spots and converted. And Indiana's rotations were too slow and too predictable to stop it. Clark's post-game assessment was honest. She pointed to anticipate.
I feel like any of the officiating rule changes are impacting how you're able to play as a team defensively.
Officiating wasn't our problem tonight.
Patient, activity, and awareness as the areas where the Fever fell short, and she admitted that when Indiana tried to double team, we were slow in our rotations. She also said Portland did a great job exploiting Indiana's switches and that she personally needed to do a better job staying straight up on ISO defense and moving her feet. That's real accountability. But what she's describing is also exactly what White's scheme kept putting her in, one-on-one situations without clean help coverage behind her over and over. That defensive environment is where Clark's foul trouble came from. She picked up her fourth foul around the 8-minute mark of the third quarter, came back in and picked up her fifth shortly after. So, she spent most of the quarter on the bench, while Portland was extending a lead that eventually ballooned to 25 points. 21 to 22 total minutes for Clark on the night, and a big chunk of the minutes she did play came in stretches where Indiana was already chasing the game. What made it worse is that there's no evidence from the footage or the box score that White made any meaningful defensive adjustments when Portland started going to work in the second half. The confusion between
Hold with the board. Clark, eyes down the floor. Up ahead, Boston. Great catch. The vision from Clark, and Boston to the rim, and Indiana sprints out to an 8-2 lead.
And those
switching, zone, and trapping that observers flagged in the first half was still there in the third. Portland's players were navigating it fine. Indiana's weren't. And the whole time that 37-point quarter was being built, Boston, Mitchell, Cunningham, and Herbert Harrigan were putting up real numbers on the other end, which makes the defensive collapse even harder to accept. Look at the box score from this game and you'll see something that should genuinely bother every Fever fan. Boston dropped 18 points. Mitchell put up 17.
Clark in the paint. Retrieves the dribble. Mitchell, what a cut! What a delivery from Clark!
so little.
Cunningham added 15, and Herbert Harrigan came off the bench for 11. That's 61 points from 4 players in a game Indiana lost by 16. And those aren't garbage time numbers padded in the fourth quarter when Portland already had the game locked up. That's real production from a core that can actually score. Clark's final line reads 6 points on 1 for 7 shooting, 5 fouls, 21 minutes. And that's a season low, the second lowest scoring total of her professional career. The instinct is to call it an off night, but that read falls apart fast when you look at what actually happened. 6 assists against 1 turnover in 21 minutes with foul trouble that came directly from the defensive scheme problems we already talked about, and limited minutes driven by White pulling her during Indiana's best stretch of the game. Clark wasn't struggling. Clark was being managed out of her own rhythm, and the part that really stings is what White did with the Clark-Boston pick and roll.
Stephanie White has got to go. This relationship is over. She crashed out and benched Caitlin Clark throughout the game. That is why Caitlin Clark was out of it. This is nasty. The owner needs to step in and fire this goofball, this freaking clown of a coach. See,
that combination is Indiana's most dangerous offensive weapon. And according to multiple analysts who watched the film, White reportedly abandoned it entirely after Clark committed a single turnover early in the game. 1 turnover. Instead of running the action that Boston's 18-point night proves was working, the offense collapsed into isolation plays, which is the worst possible way to use Clark, and one of the main reasons her shooting efficiency cratered. Clark logged 3 assists in the first 3 minutes of the game when she was actually operating freely. So when White pulled her and then stopped running sets designed for her, Clark spent long stretches on the floor as a decoy rather than a threat. Mitchell's 17 points proved the perimeter scoring is real when Indiana runs the right actions. And
get her out of here, bro. Get her out of here. Caitlin Clark said it. The refs what? Caitlin Clark had 5 fouls. Normally, she talked greasy about the refs. She let it be known. The refs wasn't my problem. I had no problems with the refs. You know who my problem was. It's this clown Stephanie.
Cunningham's 15 is exactly the kind of wing contribution that shows up when the offense isn't forcing everyone into one-on-one situations. Herbert Harrigan scoring 11 off the bench is genuinely good news for Indiana's depth, and it's the type of performance you want to see more of going into next season. So, when you add it all up, 4 Fever players scored in double figures. Clark still distributed 6 assists against just 1 turnover despite everything working against her. And Indiana still lost by 16. That gap doesn't come from talent. Boston can score in the post and operate in pick and roll. Creates her own shot in spaces.
Nerve talking to Caitlin Clark like this, snatching her out of the game, throwing the clipboard down. Who the f do you think you are? You are a bum. You are a bum. You are a piece of garbage of a coach, man. This is crazy, man. Caitlin Clark has got to get out of Indiana. Caitlin Clark has to get out of Indiana immediately, bro. I don't care how.
Cunningham brings real toughness from the wing. Clark's season-low 6 points isn't a sign she had a bad night. It's what happens when your coach scraps the play that's working because of 1 turnover and then sits you down during a run. People were calling for White's job before Portland, but the Portland game is where that stopped being an opinion and became the loudest conversation in the WNBA fan base overnight. The coaching malpractice label had been floating around for a few weeks already, but the bench footage in the post-game presser gave everyone a specific moment to point at. White's explanation for pulling Clark in Boston during an 8-2 run, that it's just the standard rotation, landed about as well as you'd expect with fans who watched Portland immediately go on 13 straight. And then the presser made it worse because instead of owning this substitution and walking through the reasoning, White leaned on process and pointed at the player's execution as the problem. That's a genuinely hard sell when Boston scored 18, Mitchell scored 17, and Cunningham scored 15 in a loss. Clark's post-game remarks went in a completely different direction. She didn't touch officiating, didn't deflect, and pointed straight at herself. That's a player taking ownership of what's in her control. And the contrast with White pointing at process and execution made White look worse, not better. Some fans have gotten to the point where they'd rather see the Fever lose if Clark puts up big individual numbers, because they think a loss is the only thing that forces the front office's hand. That's how bad it's gotten. When your fan base is actively rooting for losses to trigger a coaching change, the situation isn't a rough patch anymore. Critics have also gone after White's overall resume pretty aggressively, pointing out that her head coaching record outside of Indiana doesn't back up the authority she's been wielding over a generational talent. The argument people keep making is simple: White's decisions have a documented pattern of undercutting what this roster can do. And one game against Portland gave everyone enough receipts to make that case without reaching for anything. The front office question now sitting in front of Amber Cox is real. Keeping White means preserving the organizational structure tied to Indiana's 2012 championship. But the people calling for a change argue that structure is actively working against Clark's development and the team's ceiling. Some analysts have gone as far as warning that if the Fever keep losing at this rate, Clark's trade value drops and Indiana ends up moving a generational player for far less than she's worth. Clark's MVP trajectory is legitimate. Boston, Mitchell, Cunningham, and the rest of this core can go on a deep playoff run with the right system around them. And the Fever's front office now has a very specific, very public 100-84 loss sitting in front of them as evidence. Think about what Indiana put up against a Portland team that played a near-perfect game on the second night of a back-to-back. 4 players in double figures. Clark averaging 22.5 points and 8.5 assists coming in. And the Fever still couldn't get a win because the coaching kept getting in the way of the talent. Portland's record now sits above Indiana's, an expansion team. That's where things stand right now, and the front office can't look away from that anymore. Should the Indiana Fever fire Stephanie White? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you don't miss out on all things basketball. Click the video on the screen and we will see you in the next one.